For much of the early 20th century, women were expected to stay home, raising children, managing households, and quietly supporting the nation from the sidelines. Serving in the U.S. Navy, or any branch of the military, was highly looked down upon, and was seen as a man's duty, not a woman's right. But when the world went to war in 1917, women wanted to truly help, yet even then they were blocked from official service. Only through desperate wartime needs did the military begin to open the door, just a crack. This began with women selling and buying war bonds, sending supplies and clothing to troops overseas, holding troop gift drives, and rationing food. But as the war progressed, women were allowed to join the Navy, but only in clerical and administrative roles, known as yeomen or yeomanettes. These women were the first to wear Navy uniforms and train alongside men.
The last inspection of your boat life. The colonel and captain and lieutenants are there. Everything's got to be shipshape, shoes like a mirror, locker box neat and orderly, and your Adam's apple under control. You suddenly realize that women in uniform have a great responsibility. You're in the spotlight. You're not Susie or Mary or Jane anymore. You're a Marine. Then it's all over. That is, all except for one thing.
The last review. We learned a lot of things about drilling in 6 weeks. You can tell that by the rhythm of the step. You can feel all the heels hit the ground at the same time. The music beats out the cadence. Nobody calling out left, right. You don't need that anymore. It's hard to remember that little girl who got off the train 6 weeks ago and didn't know her port leg from her starboard. Now they know we've got our marching legs on, too. They can tell we're Marines and good ones. By the time you're passing by the reviewing stand, your heart is doing nip-ups. That's one time you'll never forget.
One of the first women to make this happen was Opha May Johnson, who is from Kokomo, Indiana, and was the first woman in line when the recruiting station in Washington, D.C. opened its doors to women. She underwent a challenging path of rigorous interviews and examinations in order to enroll. But in the end, out of the many thousands that enlisted, she was the first of 305 women that had enrolled during the 4 months of recruiting, according to World War I's centennial. This led her to becoming a legend due to her taking the role of being the first woman Marine. From here, she was announced in newspapers as the first woman in the Marines, and was reported to be looking out after the interests of young women who were to also be enrolled in the Marine Corps. Now, just as Opha May Johnson was the first woman Marine, there was a first woman for the Navy too, which was Loretta Perfectus Walsh. Now, the event giving way to the first woman of the Navy began when in the spring of 1917, when the U.S. was preparing to go to war, not enough men had been enlisting to meet the demand. So, according to history.navy.mil, on the 19th of March 1917, Secretary of the Navy Josephus Daniels determined that women could be enrolled in the U.S. Naval Reserve Force. The idea behind this was to prompt or shame young men to enlist. So a lieutenant commander asked if Walsh had wanted to enlist, and she immediately agreed. Now, Walsh had made history by making that choice to enlist in the Naval Reserves just prior to the United States entering World War I. This led to her being the first out of 11,000 women to serve in the Navy during the war, where she worked as a clerk for the Navy League in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. But as World War I ended, time went on, and soon enough we were in a Second World War. At this time, a bill was signed later in 1942 to create a program called WAVES. It stood for Women Accepted for Volunteer Emergency Service, a bill signed by President Roosevelt establishing a U.S. Naval Reserve Women's Branch on July 30th, 1942, to allow women to serve in a wider range of roles, according to Navy.mil. Which these roles women were now allowed to serve in consisted of areas like aviation, medical professions, communications, intelligence, science and technology, and more. WAVES challenged wartime gender perceptions and offered new opportunities for women desiring to enter the U.S. military.
This is the Air Controlman's rating badge. worn by the men and women who have the very important and responsible job of controlling the Navy's air traffic. One of the places where women who wear the Air Controlman rating badge are likely to be assigned is the control tower of a naval air station. In this tower, for example, 3 waves: an air traffic control operator, a ground control operator, and a flight data operator control all landings and takeoffs at the field. Let us watch them as they handle the arrival of an air evacuation plane bringing in an emergency stretcher case.
Anacostia Tower, this is Navy 9070, 10 miles southeast. Request landing instructions. Request priority on landing. Urgent litter case. Over.
The air traffic control operator answers the Mercy flight, gives them the wind direction and velocity, and assigns a traffic pattern and runway. The flight data operator informs the duty officer of the plane's approach so that he can have an ambulance standing by. Meanwhile, the air traffic control operator searches the air and the field for conflicting traffic, getting ready to clear the way for the Mercy flight to land.
Navy 3619, hold east of field until further advised. Over.
Anacostia Tower, Navy 3619, Wilco out.
After the wars, the fight for equality continued. The 1970s brought more changes. Women began training for roles in surface warfare and aviation. Then in the 1990s, women were finally allowed to serve on combat ships. That same decade in the 90s, Rear Admiral Louise Carey Wilmot made history, becoming the first woman to command a naval base. Today, women serve across every level of the Navy, from enlisted roles to top leadership positions. They command ships, manage operations, and serve in combat zones. And though challenges remain, the path paved by pioneers like Loretta Perfectus Walsh and Opha May Johnson continues to expand.